Sylvester Stallone steps into a high-end clothing store in the heart of the city, dressed not for attention, but for comfort. A simple leather jacket, weathered boots, the kind of man who's lived more than he talks about. He scans the room quietly and spots something most people would overlook. An elderly veteran standing alone near the door, ignored, dismissed, just for the way he looks. But before Stallone even says a word, a young clerk turns to the old man and snaps, "That coat isn't for someone like you," loud enough for half the store to hear. What happens next doesn't just silence the room. It changes how everyone in America sees dignity, memory, and what it really means to be a hero. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from. And if stories like this move you, don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow at 6 p.m. we have another one that will stay with you long after the screen fades. He didn't look like much, just another old man standing by the glass entrance, squinting in the sunlight, holding the door for strangers who didn't say thank you. But something about the way he stood, still straight, like gravity still had to ask his permission, told you he was more than he appeared. His name was Carl. No one asked. The security guard gave him a glance, the kind that weighs a man's shoes before it meets his eye. Carl wore battered brown boots, military issue, long, outdated, but polished to a dull shine. His jacket was too thin for winter, too thick for summer, and carried the smell of someone who lived more outside. His hands were tucked back, the way soldiers do when they're waiting or remembering. Inside, the store gleamed like a jewelry box. Mannequins stood draped in Italian wool, bathed in soft white light that made everything and everyone look better than they really were. Jazz played low over hidden speakers. Each movement felt choreographed, silent, controlled. That's where the girl came in. She was young, sharp-jawed, with a neck like a swan and lashes too perfect to be real. Her name tag said Marissa in bold serif. When Carl stepped forward gently, quietly, as if not to disturb the air itself, Marissa turned, only halfway. "Yes," she said, voice brittle. Carl smiled, the way you do when you're used to being invisible, but still choose grace. "I was wondering if I could try on the navy coat in the front, the one with the brass buttons." She blinked, twice, as if the sentence hadn't made sense in her language. "The navy peacoat," he clarified. Now she turned fully, arms folded, smile tight, head tilted, just enough to show it was over. "That jacket's $2,800, she said. "It's hand-stitched in Milan." "Probably not." "What you're looking for." Carl looked at it again. "It reminds me of something I wore when I first shipped out, back in '66. There was silence, long enough to feel cruel. Then came the chuckle, not from Marissa, but from another clerk behind her, folding ties. "Well, maybe come back for Veterans Day," the man said. "We give out discount coffee." Marissa smirked. Carl lowered his gaze. His fingers moved slightly behind his back, a reflex. "But thanks for stopping by," she added, already turning away. Carl nodded once. He didn't say another word. He started to leave. But that's when the door opened again, and in walked someone the room hadn't expected. Not in that neighborhood, not in that store, and definitely not walking in like he owned nothing and everything. Sylvester Stallone, gray at the temples, black leather jacket slightly creased at the elbows, sunglasses still on despite the dim interior. He moved like someone who'd been punched by life and hit back with poetry, slow, solid, intentional. At first, no one recognized him. Not really, because we never expect the extraordinary to enter our ordinary. He saw Carl, and Carl saw him. Stallone didn't go to the front. He didn't look at the displays or the brand signs or the sparkling lights. He walked right to the old man, lifted his sunglasses and said, "Carl?" Carl blinked. "Yeah?" "You were at Firebase Ripcord 101st, right?" Carl's spine straightened. "Yeah." "I thought I recognized your face." Stallone smiled just a little. "You were in the article, the one with the silver star." Now everyone noticed. Marissa had stopped folding her arms. The tie folder had disappeared to the back room. 2 customers froze by the dressing rooms, iPhones half raised. Stallone turned to Marissa. He was asking about the Navy. She nodded slowly, shame starting to creep into her face like a shadow at sunset. "Bring it to him," Stallone said. Then softer, "and find the right size." Carl blinked. "That's not necessary." "It is," Stallone replied. "You already paid for it 40 years ago." Carl opened his mouth, closed it again, and then he smiled. That's when the cameras came out. But this wasn't a moment built for phones. This was for something deeper, memory maybe. But while Stallone may have silenced the room, he hadn't silenced. Therefore, the next words from Marissa would either break the moment or complete it. She walked forward, slowly, still unsure of her own voice. I didn't know," she said. "I'm sorry, sir." Carl tilted his head. "What gave me away? The boots or the wrinkles?" She froze. "I didn't mean—" "I know what you meant." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eye. "People like you never do." Stallone stepped in, not to protect Carl, but to share his weight. He didn't ask for anything, Stallone said. Just a moment. Just a coat that reminded him of who he used to be. He looked around, at the silk-lined suits, the shoes too perfect to walk in, the air too cold to breathe. "And I walk into this place, get offered a cappuccino, and not one of you wondered why a man with boots like his stood outside for 10 minutes before he dared step in." A silence thicker than velvet, then softly one of the women by the mirrors, tears on her cheek, then another, then more. Carl didn't understand it, not really. But he stood straighter. And when Stallone turned to him and said, "Let's get out of here," Carl didn't resist. They walked out side by side, and someone caught a photo of it. The vet and the legend, one in a new coat, the other still carrying the same old fight. But the story wasn't over. Therefore, what happened next, outside the store, would matter just as much. Because while the internet lit up with the image, it was what Stallone did afterward that made it unforgettable. They didn't speak much at first. Carl sat stiffly in the passenger seat of Stallone's matte black SUV, holding the coat across his lap like it was something sacred. Not because it was expensive, but because it was given. Without paperwork, without conditions, without strings. That was a rare thing in his life. Stallone drove with one hand on the wheel and the other resting on the open window, cigar unlit between his fingers. The wind played with the edges of his hair, and his jaw worked slowly, as if chewing on silence. The restaurant they arrived at wasn't fancy. It wasn't supposed to be. It was a small, family-owned Italian place off a quiet side street. Checkered tablecloths, faded Sinatra posters, the smell of garlic and old wood in the air. Stallone nodded at the host, who instantly recognized him and waved them toward a booth in the back without a word. They sat across from each other like old friends who hadn't yet caught up. Carl was the first to speak. "You sure you want to waste your night on a stranger?" Stallone smiled. Something older, quieter. "You're not a stranger." Carl looked down at the coat again. "You remembered me." "I don't forget soldiers," Stallone said. "Real ones." Carl blinked. The words landed like a blessing. Their food arrived. Meatballs for Stallone, linguine with clams for Carl, no wine, just water and a shared silence that grew warmer with every passing minute. Carl spoke again, slower now, looser. "I didn't come back right, after the war." Stallone nodded. "Most don't. Lost the house. Wife left. Couldn't hold a job more than 6 months. Every fire alarm, every damn car backfire. I'd hit the deck like I was back in the bush." He didn't cry. He'd done enough of that long ago. "I used to sit in the park and pretend I was waiting for someone, just so people wouldn't look at me like I was loitering." Stallone didn't interrupt. He just listened, like it mattered, because it did. But as Carl opened up, Something in Stallone's eyes darkened, not with judgment, but memory. Therefore, he shared something too. "I met a kid once," Stallone said, pushing his plate aside, 18, barely shaving. Came up to me at a USO event in Kuwait. Said my movies kept him alive during basic, that he watched First Blood before deployment, like it was a religious ritual. Carl smirked. Poor kid. Yeah, except he didn't make it home. Carl's smirk faded. He sent me a letter, Stallone continued. Said if he didn't make it back, he hoped I'd keep telling stories about people like him. Like you. A beat. You ever get letters like that? Stallone asked. Carl nodded once. Couple. Did you answer? Carl's voice dropped to a whisper. I was too late. The waitress came and went. Refilled water. Droptic. Didn't say a word about the cameras that had started lining up outside. Carl leaned back. You know what the hardest part is? He said. Stallone raised an eyebrow. It's not the war. It's not losing the house. It's not even the nights I wake up screaming in a language I don't understand anymore. Then what? Carl's fingers tightened around the edge of the table. It's the disappearance. The fact that you can give 30 years of your life to something, come home, and vanish. But before Stallone could answer, the waitress returned, this time, not alone. Behind her stood a man in his mid-30s, clean-cut, navy blazer, and eyes that widened the second he saw Carl. Excuse me, the man said, voice shaky. I think you served with my grandfather. Carl turned, confused. The man pulled out a folded photo, black and white, faded edges. It was a picture of 5 young men in uniform, crouched in the mud, grinning with cigarettes between their teeth. One of them was Carl, clear as day. My mom told me about you, the man said. She said you saved his life during the ambush at Hill 482. Carl stared at the photo, his lips parted. No sound came. She kept your name. She said if I ever met you, I should tell you. We didn't forget. The booth went silent. Stallone looked at Carl. Carl looked at the man. Then, finally, he exhaled. Jimmy, the man smiled, your grandfather was the only one who remembered my birthday in country. Therefore, something cracked open in Carl, a dam that had been holding grief, guilt, and ghost silence for decades. He stood, slowly, took the man's hand, and for a moment they just stood there, generations apart. Outside, the world had already taken notice. The image of Carl and Stallone leaving the store had gone viral. People were tagging it with words like honor, respect, dignity, the kind of words that often come too late. Back at the table, Carl sat again, but he wasn't hunched anymore. He looked taller, younger even. Thank you, he said. But not to Stallone, to Jimmy, to fate, to the ghosts. Then he turned to Stallone. You didn't have to do this. I know, Stallone said. And with that, they stood to leave. But as they reached the door, Carl hesitated. He looked back at the waitress, then at Jimmy, and finally at the photo still on the table. Therefore, he took it with him, because some things are worth carrying. The next morning, Carl woke up to something he hadn't experienced in years. Noise. Not the sudden blast of helicopters or fireworks, not the phantom echoes of Hill 482 replaying in the back of his skull. This was different, softer, strange. It was his name. The clerk at the motel front desk knocked on his door, holding a cell phone like it was radioactive. Sir, someone's trying to reach you. Says it's a reporter from the Post. Carl blinked, still in the peacoat. I don't talk to newspapers, he said. The clerk hesitated. They said Stallone mentioned you by name, called you a hero. Across town, Stallone's publicist was losing her mind. Do you know what you've done? She shouted across the phone line. The story's trending on 7 platforms, and Good Morning America wants to fly both of you to New York today. Stallone leaned back on his sofa, watching old boxing footage with the sound off. I didn't do anything, he said. No, but the world thinks you did. There are hashtags. A coffee company wants to make Carl their veteran ambassador. A fashion brand offered to rename the coat after him. Stallone lit a cigar. Did anyone ask Carl what he wants? Silence. But people don't care about what he wants. They care about the moment. That was the problem. The world wanted a symbol. Carl just wanted to be left alone. He tried to go for coffee that afternoon, his usual place, corner booth by the window. But when he walked in, 5 people turned, phones already pointed at his face. He backed out before anyone said a word. Later, a pair of strangers followed him for 4 blocks, one of them whispering into their phone, "It's the guy." The veteran from the Stallone video. By evening, someone had created an Instagram account pretending to be him. Over 40,000 followers in one day. Carl stood in front of the mirror that night, staring at the reflection. The pea coat still fit, but the man inside it didn't recognize himself. But it wasn't the fame that broke him. It was the letter. It arrived folded, hand-delivered to the motel. No return address, no stamps, just his name on the front. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed. Clean, precise. We remember you, but we also remember what you did in Quezon. You can run from history, Carl, but some of us are still bleeding. His hands trembled, not from fear, from memory. He didn't tell Stallone, not at first. They met again that weekend at the same Italian place. The waitress brought out the same dishes without asking. The booth felt smaller now, or maybe Carl had grown, but his eyes were different. "You okay?" Stallone asked. Carl nodded too quickly. Stallone didn't push, he just waited. Finally, Carl spoke. "There was a mistake," he said. "Back in Nam, friendly fire. We thought they were hostiles." Stallone's brow furrowed. "It was a med tent," Carl whispered. "We didn't know. Intel said it was compromised. We went in, hot." He stared down at the meatballs like they were judgment itself. "I killed our own. 5, maybe 6. The booth went cold. Carl reached into his coat and placed the letter on the table. "I thought I buried this." Stallone picked it up, read it, then looked up. "And you've carried it ever since?" Carl didn't answer. He didn't have to. Therefore, the story wasn't simple anymore. It never had been. The internet saw a hero. Carl saw a fraud. "I'm not who they think I am," Carl said. "I don't want to be anyone's face, anyone's campaign. I'm just a man who made it home when others didn't." Stallone tapped the letter once, then folded it and handed it back. "You made a call in war. That's hell." "No call made in hell is clean," Carl shook his head. "They'll find out. Then let them." A beat. "You think I'm afraid of truth?" Stallone said. "Truth is the only thing that gives you peace. Everything else is just noise." But Carl wasn't ready for truth, not yet. The following day, someone leaked the story. Not the full one, just enough. A blog post titled, "The Truth About Stallone's Veteran Hero Isn't So Heroic." The article was cruel, shallow, and sensationalized. It quoted anonymous sources, dragged his name through the mud, and ended with, "Should we be celebrating someone with blood on their hands?" The backlash was immediate. Sponsors pulled out. The coat brand canceled the Carl collection. Comment sections turned from praise, but Stallone. He stayed silent until the press conference. He stepped out in front of a sea of microphones, sunglasses on, coat collar high. "Carl is a soldier. That means he's been through things most of you will never understand. He made decisions under pressure that none of you will ever face." He paused. "You want clean heroes? Watch cartoons." He took off his glasses. "You want real ones? Look for the scars." The room fell into silence, but even that wasn't enough. Therefore, Stallone did the one thing Carl never expected. He invited him back on stage. Carl stood beside him. No script, no handlers, just the weight of everything they'd lived. He cleared his throat. "I'm not proud of everything I've done, but I am proud I came home and tried to live, that I didn't disappear." He looked straight at the cameras. "And I'm proud that someone like him," he nodded to Stallone, "saw me when no one else did." The internet didn't know what to do with that, because truth isn't viral, but it stays. They didn't call ahead. They didn't tell anyone. Stallone showed up that evening in a worn hoodie and ball cap, the kind of outfit designed not to draw attention, and failed entirely to do so. Carl stood beside him in the pea coat, the same one, the one that started it all. Outside the clothing store, the windows were dark. The brand had gone into crisis mode after the backlash. But Stallone didn't come for revenge, and Carl didn't come for an apology. They came for something else, to finish the moment they never got to end. A crowd had gathered, of course, not huge, but present. Some with phones, some just watching, all silent. Carl stood in front of the door again, but this time he didn't hesitate. He opened it, not for himself, but for an older woman behind him. She smiled, said, "Thank you." He smiled back. Inside it was quiet. A skeleton crew behind the register. The jazz was gone. The lights dimmed. Marissa was there. Not with her arms crossed this time, not with sarcasm loaded in her voice. She stepped forward slower than before. "I saw the press conference," she said, "and the blog. I didn't know." Carl held up a hand. "I don't need you to explain," he said. "Just be better." She nodded. Nothing dramatic, no tears, just truth. They left without buying anything. That wasn't the point. Dinner that night wasn't at the Italian place. Carl had invited Stallone somewhere else. It was a quiet diner near a railroad track. Vinyl booths, coffee strong enough to keep ghosts awake. A waitress who called them both honey, without irony. They sat by the window. Outside, the sun was slipping behind the horizon, dragging gold across the pavement. Carl looked tired, but not worn out, just finished in the best way. "You know what hurts?" he asked, stirring his coffee. Stallone looked up. "It's not the mistakes, not even the memories." He tapped the tabletop once. "It's the fact that we come back from war and the world just moves on, like we were scenery." Stallone leaned back. "Maybe the world doesn't know how to look," Carl chuckled. "Maybe. A beat. But you did." Stallone sipped from his cup, then leaned in slightly. "I didn't see a hero that day," he said. "I saw a man who still stood at attention when no one was watching." He paused. "Those are the ones who matter most." Outside, someone knocked on the glass. It was Jimmy, the grandson, holding a manila envelope. Carl met him at the door. "This came in today," Jimmy said. "Military records request. I pulled a favor." Carl hesitated. "I didn't ask." "I know, but maybe you should see." Carl opened the envelope. Inside was a scanned field report, black and white, smudged with time. At the bottom, "Incident attributed to faulty coordinates from HQ. No soldier error determined." Carl blinked. The words didn't make sense at first. Then they did. All this time, he hadn't pulled the trigger on the wrong tent. Command had. He stood there, quiet, still. Then folded the paper carefully and slipped it into his coat. He walked back to Stallone. "You ever carry something so long you forget it wasn't even yours to carry?" Stallone didn't answer. He didn't need to. They finished dinner slowly. No rush, no audience. When the check came, Carl insisted. Stallone didn't fight him. That, too, was a gift. Outside, the night air had cooled. A breeze moved through the parking lot, kicking up leaves and cigarette butts. Carl stopped at the car. "You know," he said, "I always thought I'd die alone, somewhere quiet. Just fade out." Stallone raised an eyebrow. "Still might." Carl laughed, "But not tonight." They drove in silence for a while, the kind of silence that doesn't need filling. Carl looked out the window, then turned back. "You ever think," he asked, "that maybe the real medal is just being remembered?" Stallone smiled. "Only if it's by the right people." He pulled into a quiet lot overlooking the city. Just the two of them. Two figures in the dark, watching lights twinkle like lost stars. Carl broke the silence. "I never told you what I did when I got that coat." "What?" "I walked home." "Where's home?" Carl looked down. "I don't know anymore." But Stallone looked at him, not with pity, not with awe, just brotherhood. Therefore, he said, "Then let's make it this booth, this night, this damn diner. For now." Carl nodded and smiled. The world would keep spinning, the videos would fade, the internet would forget. But Carl wouldn't, because for the first time in decades he hadn't been looked through. He'd been seen. And so the two of them sat, side by side. No stage, no slogans, no cameras, just two old men, sharing a meal, like old friends, like it always should have been. "If I discuss draw. You never know who you're holding the door for. Sometimes it's yourself." Hey, if you made it all the way to the end, I just want to say thank you, not just for watching, but for seeing. You know, we all walk past people every day without really looking. But sometimes a simple gesture, a second of respect, can mean the world to someone who's been forgotten. Carl didn't ask for attention. He didn't want applause. He just wanted to feel human again. And if this story reminded you to slow down, to look up, and to honor the people who came before us, then maybe we're already changing the world one heart at a time. Stay kind, stay strong, and never underestimate the power of being the one who notices. See you in the next one.